If you want to make a huge visual impact on your physique in the least amount of time, build bigger shoulders. Not only do women find men with broader shoulders more attractive, but wider delts also give the illusion of a smaller waist and play a huge role in achieving the coveted V-taper. Unfortunately, if you make the same mistake I did and follow the meathead approach to shoulder training, you'll find yourself walking down a road that promises boulders but only delivers pebbles. The meathead approach to shoulder training starts off with a bunch of heavy shoulder pressing, where you're using more weight than you can handle. From there, you'll find a nice empty area with a mirror where you'll proceed to perform front raises by swinging the weight. You'll then finish your workout with a few token sets of lateral raises, using a weight that's so heavy that the movement ends up resembling the bastard child of a lateral raise and a shrug. On the other hand, you could also fall victim to the minimalist approach to shoulder training, where you are doing nothing more than overhead presses and focusing on getting stronger. The proper way to train your shoulders, however, lies somewhere in between those two approaches. Sure, there are those genetically gifted individuals whose shoulders would blow up from nothing more than a few overhead presses each week, but they're the exception. You see, building wider, rounder delts doesn't have to be this elaborate process where you are dedicating an entire day to shoulder training. Likewise, it's usually not as simple as overhead pressing a couple of times per week. If you want to build well-rounded delts, there are two things that have to happen. For starters, you've got to understand the anatomy and physiology of the shoulders. Once you understand what muscles are involved, and more importantly, what function they're responsible for, choosing the right exercises and how to perform them more effectively becomes obvious second. Once you've got your three key movements, focus on progression. If you're performing the right exercises using proper form and gradually increasing the load, for example, increasing reps without sacrificing weight, or increasing weight without sacrificing reps, your shoulders will grow. In this video I want to briefly go over the basic anatomy of the deltoids and their functions, and then I want to go over what are, in my opinion, the only 3 shoulder exercises you need for building 3D delts. The anatomy of the deltoids. The deltoids are made up of 3 heads, the anterior deltoid or front delt, the lateral deltoid or mid delt, and the posterior deltoid or rear delt. The main function of the anterior deltoid is shoulder flexion, raising your arm up in front of your body. The front delt is also responsible for internal rotation of the humerus, rotating the shoulder inward. Now that you understand the role of the front delt, it's not hard to see why this video will not include any anterior deltoid isolation exercises. Because they're heavily involved in all of your pushing movements, any additional volume would just be overkill. The posterior deltoid is responsible for transverse shoulder abduction, moving your arms out to the side, as well as external rotation of the shoulder and shoulder hyperextension. Like the front delts, most of the heavy compound lifts you're performing, particularly pulling movements, will stimulate the rear delts. That said, research shows that isolation exercises are superior for activating the rear delts. The main function of the lateral deltoid is shoulder abduction, raising your arm out to the side, and unlike the front and rear delts, most of the heavy compound lifts you're already doing will not target the mid delts to a significant degree. Now that you understand what muscles you are targeting and what movement they're involved in, it's time to go over the best exercises for building round 3D delts. Number 1. Primary pressing movement. Your primary pressing movement should do a couple of things. First, it should be a big heavy compound exercise that allows you to load the shoulders. Second, rather than focusing on one portion of the deltoids, it should target all 3 heads. That said, the overhead press is the obvious choice, and although research shows that the standing dumbbell press elicits higher front, mid and rear delt activation, progressive overload with this movement may prove to be an issue due to the nature of the setup. With the overhead press, however, you're not only targeting all 3 heads of the deltoid, but it's also a great way to overload and work up to heavier and heavier weight. And because progressive overload is the main pathway by which we build muscle, getting stronger at this lift will result in wider, rounder delts. Number 2. Lateral raise. The next exercise you must include in your training is some sort of lateral raise, since the mid delts won't otherwise get much stimulus. And because they're not getting much secondary involvement during other movements, it's critical that we maximize mid-delt activation with this exercise. And although you may already be including some type of dumbbell lateral raise in your training, there are a few adjustments that can be made to ensure we are further emphasizing the mid-delts. Let's look at the traditional dumbbell lateral raise, for example. The further in front of the body the dumbbell is, the more involvement we get from the front delt. This is why it's imperative that we do our best to raise the dumbbell directly at our side. That said, even when we are raising the dumbbell directly at our sides, the front delt is still bearing a good deal of the load. This is why most experts recommend internally rotating the shoulder during this exercise, as it'll further reduce involvement of the front delt. This, however, will put your shoulder in a vulnerable position, increasing risk of impingement, especially as you progressively add more weight. An easy way to avoid this is to externally rotate the shoulder and lean slightly forward. Not only will this put your shoulders in a safer position, but it'll also shift most of the load to the mid-delts. And if you want to minimize the chance of cheating and further isolate the mid-delts, I recommend a chest-supported version where you are using an incline bench for support number 3 direct rear delt exercise. Although we're already hitting the rear delts quite a bit with heavy compound pulling movements, I recommend adding a bit of isolation work to ensure we are maximizing muscle growth. For this purpose, I recommend the reverse pec deck. Not only has this exercise been shown to elicit greater activation than compound pulling movements like the lat pull down and seated row, but it's an extremely difficult exercise to mess up. Not only that, but it's going to be much easier to load than something like a rear delt raise, while also safer to perform than heavy face pulls. That said, I understand that not all gyms will be equipped with this machine. If that's the case for you, I recommend including some rear delt cable pulls instead. And if you are a bit more advanced and can handle a bit more overall volume, then a compound exercise that focuses on the rear delts like a barbell high row would be another great alternative. In any case, just make sure to include some direct rear delt work at the end of your workout to ensure no deltoid head is neglected. To summarize, make the overhead press the focal point of your shoulder training. Load the bar up and aim to get progressively stronger over time. Include some lateral raises to emphasize the mid-delts for building wider shoulders. Then finish off your workout with some direct rear delt work to add volume and ensure you're building well-balanced shoulders. Are you having a hard time building your back? Check out the back version of this video where I go over the 3 best exercises for a wider and thicker back. Would you like to see an arms version of this video? If so, make sure to hit that like button so I know it's what you want. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.